Hello Tech Pros, episode 241.
Just ask yourself, in the future, as more and more people listen to podcasts, as your future customers, clients, prospects, whatever it is, listen to podcasts, are they going to hear you or someone else?
Welcome to the podcast where we explore the opportunities, challenges, and anxieties that technical professionals and techpreneurs face when building their career, building their products, and building their business. This show is about the people behind technology and the mindsets and skill sets they developed that led to their success. You can learn more about this podcast and our guests at hellotechpros.com and about overcoming social anxiety at anxietynerd.com. All right, let's get started. Hello Tech Pros, this is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Tom Schwab. Happy Saturday, Tom.
Hey, Chad, I am thrilled to be here. And when you're an entrepreneur, I guess that means every day is Saturday, right?
Well, it kind of is. Like, it almost feels like today is like a Wednesday because to me, kind of Saturdays and Wednesdays are all kind of blended in together when you're an entrepreneur and you are your own boss. And I love it. Like, every day of the week can be the best day for my business, or it can be a day that I can choose to unplug. Either way, I'm fantastic.
Or you can make the decision to make every day Monday, but sometimes it's just the outlook on it. And I love being an entrepreneur, so at times I forget what day it is.
Oh, me too. Tell me about it, dude. Recording 7 episodes every week and publishing them and producing them, I literally have no idea what day it is most mornings when I wake up, but that's okay. It's something I can live with. Hey, for our audience, Tom Schwab knows how to build an online business. Dude, this is a Saturday entrepreneurship, and you're the perfect guest because you know how to build an online business. Marketing at its heart is starting a conversation with someone who could be an ideal customer. And Tom helps small business owners, entrepreneurs, and solopreneurs get featured on leading podcasts like Hello Tech Pros, where their prospects are already listening. Then he shows them how to turn listeners into customers. And I love it. I love it, dude. I love it because there's audience members out there on this podcast. They're on other people's podcasts. We have so many choices. It's not just like in the old school radio days when there were like 3 channels in town and you flip through them and there was like pop, and country and western. Right now we have like any media you could absolutely pick on earth. There's something out there for everyone, and there are customers out there listening. And so you just need to find out where your customers are hanging out, what they're listening to. Boom. Pitch them your topic.
Chad, you are so right, because the way I look at it is I've got an MBA, and I spent a whole lot of years, a whole lot of money to figure out what marketing was. Marketing at its heart is starting a conversation with somebody that can be an ideal customer, and you've just got to figure out the way to do that. And what we found is that the easiest place to start that conversation is where it's already going on. And if people are listening to podcasts, why not have them listen to you?
Man, I love that concept of we're not really starting the conversation with potential customers. We're joining the conversations that they're already having, right? They're already out there discussing these problems, right? They're talking about whatever's going on in their life or their business or these different aspects that they're spending money. They're like, hey, I'm spending money on this and it's not working. I'm spending money on this, it's not working. I'm trying to solve this or that problem. I wish somebody could help me. And then instead of starting the conversation, you're just jumping in on it and saying, hey, hi, my name's Chad.
Hi, my name's Chad. How can I help you? I heard you were talking about this, and you can try starting a conversation yourself. And sometimes that's interrupting. And that's old school marketing where I'm going to interrupt your football game and start to talk about something that has nothing to do with that. Or some people will try starting the conversation themselves. And if I say it, they will come. And boy, that's a long way to do it. Nobody goes on the internet anymore to search for to be sold anything. They go out there to solve their problems, and those people that can add to that, to jump in the conversation, to be helpful, those are the people that gain the trust, the authority, the know-how, and they get the sale and the long-term relationship. So to me, this is so important to tech pros because your listeners are out there. They want to grow businesses, serve people. And their problem is not that they don't have the skills. It's not that they're not good enough. By and large, I would say most of them are just unknown. You're obscure and you just need to make sure that the people you could help, the people you could serve, you've got to find a way to get in front of them.
Dude, that's so amazing. I want to dive into this topic a lot because I know a lot of technical professionals who are very good at their craft, whether it's software development or whether it's IT security, right? Or if it's infrastructure and hardware, right? These people are amazing and rock stars at doing the tasks, but the only people that know them are their employer and the colleagues that they work with, right? And so they're like, okay, if I'm going to start a business, how do I get out there and start a business doing the stuff and putting the stuff together? Because literally, like, I don't have a marketing budget. I don't have like a big name. My mom and dad aren't famous people. I've never been on a reality show. Like, how am I going to get the word out on the street that I have this stuff to sell?
And when people say, well, how do I get known? I'm like, be careful what you wish for. You want to get known, liked, and trusted. If you just want to get known, just go do some heinous crime and you'll be on the nightly news and people will know your middle name too. But it's not just enough to be known. You want to be known, liked, and trusted by people that could be your ideal customers. You don't have to be famous with everybody. You just have to be known by those people that you could serve, that could be your ideal customer, that would be thrilled to work with you. And I agree with you there, Chad. There's a lot of people that are probably less talented, less skilled, but they're really knocking it out because they're known, they're liked, and they're trusted. So I always tell people you don't need to probably work on your trade, your skills. You need to learn on how to get that out so that people see you as an expert.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have one of those those bad examples right down the street. I think he's right down the street. His name is Florida Man. Have you heard of this guy? His name is Florida Man. Everywhere I go since I moved to Florida, they're like, Chad, have you run into Florida Man? I'm like, ha ha. Who are you talking about? We're like, every time I watch the news is this afternoon, a Florida man, da 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 da, and it's something absolutely absurd and bad, bad news. Whatever it was probably something either malicious or something just stupid. And you're right. You don't want to be famous for that. You don't want to be Florida Man. You want to be known, liked, and trust in the areas that you're trying to sell your products and services.
And that's, there's really, you've got to figure out where your customers are and then how you can be of service to them and being a leader and a thought leader in there. And, there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I'm not saying that there's one that's right for every person or every industry. For a long time, we were building up businesses with blogs because, everybody read blogs. Well, over the last, few years, we've seen that go down and, that people aren't spending the time reading those. And, some people are watching more videos. Some people are doing more social media. The numbers show that lots of people are listening to podcasts. And like you said, there's, right now, I think there's 350,000 podcasts, which sounds like a lot. But when you look at how many millions of blogs there is, it's really not that much. And also, those people that are listening to podcasts right now, it's about 30% of the U.S. population. They listen to over 7 hours a week of it. So if you're like me and listen at 1.5, and I just have to say, hearing Chad's voice live is really, really weird because Chad, most of the time when I listen to you, it's at 1.5. So right. Bear with me here. But people are listening to a lot of content and they've got their favorite shows. And, I would guess, birds of a feather flock together. So there are, ideal customers that are listening to different shows. And, you just need to figure out a way to get in on that conversation.
Well, at least you've met me now in this part of my life when I think my speech patterns have increased speed a little bit. But back in the day, I was born in East Texas, and let me tell you, Tom, my speech was a lot slower than it is today. And dude, you would have to put it on like times 10 speed in order to really get the content out of whatever it was I was trying to say. So, okay, so we have a lot of podcasts, but there's not, it's not billions of podcasts like there are web pages or websites or blogs, right? We still have but there's, let's see, there's podcasts, there's still blogs, there's videos right on YouTube and everywhere else, there's social media. So let's say we've got a newbie, a new entrepreneur, and they're just getting their thing started, or just thinking about the process of launching their product or their service or whatever they're going to get into. Like, how do you pick amongst all the podcasts and all the blogs and all the videos and everything else that's out there? Like, where should you go? Where do you go to find these early adopters or these early customers?
Yeah, if you think about it, where do you go is where your ideal customers already are. You know, when I was in the Navy, we had a joke that you had to be smart enough to know right answer when told. And your customers are the ones that are telling you the right answer. So, you know, test it out a little bit. You know, if you're on social media, on Facebook, and you can't find any groups that are your ideal customers, well, that's probably because they're not hanging out there. You know, they may be on LinkedIn, you know, but if they're not on, if you're on Pinterest and they're not, why would you waste your time there? And the one thing that I always tell people is, you know, try to figure out where the customers are first, and then try to focus on one or two things. And people will say, well, should I try this or this or this? I'm like, any one of those will probably work, but it's one of those. You know, put your efforts behind that. I think people lose traction, lose results when they try, I'm going to try, you know, this for a little bit and this for a little bit. And they've got like 8 plates spinning and they're not getting traction, or they're all about ready to fall. No, pick a strategy and commit to it. If you're going to be known as the tech guy on LinkedIn, well, then focus on that. If you're going to be the tech guy that's given Facebook Live updates, focus on that. But just don't be the guy that shows up, or gal, I'm sorry, you know, every now and then, because it's really consistency. And that consistency also builds trust. Also look at, you know, your budget too. There's a lot of things that you can do. You know, I'm not saying that being a podcast guest is the end all. You know, you can be a guest on radio. You can be on a guest on television. But one of the major differences there is the way the business model is set up. You know, if I call up a television station today and say, hey, I've got great information that could help your audience, I guarantee you it's going to be the sales department that calls me back. And they're going to say, you know, Tom, if you would like to buy this amount of advertising, we'll get you on the 5 a.m. news. And if you want to buy this amount, you can get on the 5 p.m. news. It's really an advertising-based model, whereas podcasts are based on service. You know, the host wants great guests. They want, you know, interesting people that can help their audience. So that's what I love about it. And then the other thing is looking at, you know, the difference between a spend and an investment. So if you spend 10 minutes working on a tweet. Now, I know you can reschedule the tweets and everything, but by and large, that tweet goes out there, that image goes out there, and it's gone. If you buy some advertising, it's there and then it's gone. But when you do things like blogs or, you know, podcast interviews, that's evergreen content. Mm-hmm. And, you know, right now we're talking on a Saturday in 2016. And I guarantee you right now there's somebody listening to this on a Monday in 2020 that there's going, this is great. And to them, it's new. So that content there is going to be producing results for you for a long term. So always look at the impact that has.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the evergreen of these episodes, right? So no matter when we publish them, absolutely. They're published on a Saturday, but people so far into the future can be looking at this, listening to this for the very first time because it's brand new to them. Like for us, this was 4 years ago in the past, but for them, for our listeners right now, it may be 2016, it may be sometime far in the future, but that content is all evergreen. One point I want to throw out to you though is that the advertising on the podcast is just as evergreen as the podcast itself, right? So, for instance, all of my sponsors who have sponsored Hello Tech Pros up until now, they're getting a heck of a deal, heck of a discount, because when they bought in early in the podcast, when I had not a lot of followers, not a lot of listeners, they got that discount at that price, right? But that content is still out there and still being downloaded today and in 2020, right? They are getting downloads far into the future at the prices of whenever they bought the podcast. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, very much so. And think about it. If you're listening to this podcast, you know you have done this, or you find a new podcast, or you listen to an episode, and it's like, wow, this is great. You don't wait for the next week for the next episode or the next day for the next episode to come out. No, you start listening to back episodes. You see which ones are the most popular, which topics interest you. So that's that evergreen content where you start going back in time. And, it's an amazing thing because we can time shift all of this. You don't have to listen. It's not like radio where if you're not listening while we're talking or you have to get up and, run to the bathroom where you miss it. No, just pause it. Slow it down if I talk too fast. Speed it up if Chad talks too slow. I love it. It puts the power back in the listener's hands, the consumer's hands, and it makes it easier for advertisers and for the hosts and for the listeners.
And let's go back to the known, like, and trust, which you brought up before. So hugely important. For me, I know a lot of people because I kind of hear their names, I see their stuff. But when I listen to someone's voice, like I'm listening to Tom's voice, and I can really empathize with what he's talking about. Like I can feel the emotions coming off of him, and he's a likable guy. I mean, how can you listen to Tom and not like what he's talking about and who he is, right? So just by hearing our voice, there may be some people who are like, okay, yeah, Chad's too, I don't know, he's too nasally, he's just too whiny, or Tom's this or that or whatever, and they're nitpicking us. Fine, great. They'll tune into some other podcast. But by and large, when you're listening to somebody over and over and over, multiple times a week or multiple times a month, like you're naturally building a know, like, and trust factor that outweighs any kind of blog post ever, because you're really getting into the in-depths, like what's the emotion going on here? Like they're super excited about this new technology, or Chad was really struggling with that social anxiety that he used to have, right? And I think that builds a lot of value there to the audience.
Yeah, and I've had this discussion before, and I would love to see somebody do a study on it or a test, and I don't know how you would do that, but the engagement on different mediums, right? So if we were on video right now, all right, you could see us, you could all that, but then it'd be the question of, well, is that take number 1 or is it take number 5? Am I reading cue cards or a teleprompter? Am I using my radio voice and, all of that? But, podcast is so sort of raw. The way I explain it to people is it's almost like you're sitting at breakfast and you hear 2 people behind you talking and you just got to listen in. Mm-hmm. And at certain times, they're explaining something and you can't see it, but it almost makes you want to turn around and look and like, I have to see what these people look like, or I've got to go to their website to check out what they were talking about. And to me, it's just so real and intimate. I mean, I've heard things about friends that I've known for years. I'll listen to them on a podcast. It's like, I'll listen there. And something comes up. It's like, wow, I never knew that. Mm-hmm. So I think there's just something about this medium, and I think most people are very comfortable too. Even if if you don't like public speaking, and we talk to clients about this, and say, would you get on a plane tomorrow to go talk to 1,000 ideal customers? And there's a lot that look like deer in the headlights, and they're like, I don't want to speak to 1,000 people. And it's like, don't worry, you can stay at home. You can talk to Chad, and if you can talk to him like on the phone back and forth, you can talk to 1,000, 10,000, whatever it is of customers. And so it's really it's not intimidating for anybody, and I think it really comes through in the conversations.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, because when I launched this podcast, honestly, Tom, I had a lot of anxiety about reaching out to strangers and doing invites and say, hey, Tom, like, I don't know you, you don't know me, but I'm thinking about putting this podcast thing together. Like, would you like to be on the show? Instead, I reached out to friends and family and colleagues and ex-coworkers and so forth. And I'll be honest with you, I only got a small, less than 50% of yeses. I didn't get very many no's. I don't want to do that. But I got a lot of, I'm uncomfortable with it. And when I would ask them, hey, what's going on? Why are you uncomfortable? Do you think I'm not going to actually produce it? Do you think I'm going to make like the production quality sound like crap? Like, what are you afraid of? And they're like, I just don't like the sound of my voice. And I'm nervous of sharing my thoughts. And I don't know what questions you're going to ask me and like thinking on the spot. I'm like, dude, like we've known each other for 10 years. And the conversations that we have at work and in life, that's the same kind of stuff we're going to be talking about. The only difference is we're going to be recording it. And they're like, yeah, but thousands of people will be listening to it. They're going to be judging me. Like, that weirds me out. Have you felt the same thing or heard the same thing?
Yes, and I always say your first interview is always your worst interview. Yeah. I don't care how prepared you are. There's still, nerves, and I've got a checklist that I go through, and I'll definitely share the checklist here at the end because. Checklists are written in blood, and I've got to say most of the blood is on this checklist. And there's, things I've learned along the way just to make it easier, to make sure you check your microphone before you call, and to turn off the Dropbox syncing so that in the middle of this conversation, when that video gets sent to me, our connection doesn't go. Yep. Exactly. It's happened. But there is some nerves with it. But I think if you look at it, okay, listen to it. It's a bad metaphor on podcasts. But the host is not trying to do gotcha. This is not 60 Minutes and a zinger interview or anything like that. No, they want the guest to be comfortable, to be able to share information. The host doesn't want the guest to look like a buffoon, so they're cheering for you too. And to me, it's fun. I'm not a writer by my natural talent. I'm an engineer at heart. That's what my undergrad and graduate degree was in. And I always say, English is my second language. I don't really have a first one. So for me to write a blog, that's painful. I dictate most of mine, and then somebody else cleans it up. But for me to talk on a podcast interview, to talk with people, to laugh, to meet new people, that's fun. And if I can grow my business while having fun, and I can do it from home, from work, from vacation, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, probably the only better way as the cold weather comes to Michigan here is if Chad and I were sitting together in Orlando right now having the discussion, but it would be a much, much longer podcast.
Well, come on down, man. Come on down to Orlando next time you're in town. We'll do a live on the scene podcast. I've never done one of those. I've never done one where I've recorded the person directly in front of me. Even when I'm recording episodes with people here in town, like local what are we called? I don't even know what we're called. But anyway, the people that live here in town, I've only Skyped with them, which is kind of embarrassing. I've never really sat down with them with two microphones. So you can test that out with me, Tom. That will be fun and amazing. Tell you what, in just a moment, when we come back, let's talk about the process of entrepreneurship and getting this thing launched, and before you want to be on a podcast kind of stuff. Like, what are the things that you have to think about? What are the things you need to do? Like having your product ready, having your service ready. Like where do we need to be before we get on the podcast and start doing these episodes? But first, we'll take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by you, the audience. Instead of looking for new corporate sponsors, I've decided to adopt a pay-per-value model. What that means is you decide on how much I get paid. If you're just browsing and have yet to get value out of the show, don't feel obligated to pay a darn thing. However, if this podcast does its intended job of helping you build your career, build your products, or build your business, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. Pick the level of recurring donation that matches the level of value you get out of this show, or make a one-time sponsorship for that big aha moment that have helped turn things around for you. Become a sponsor today at patreon.com/hellotechpros or visit hellotechpros.com/sponsor. Okay, we're back with Tom Schwab. Tom is an online business expert, and he helps business owners, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs get features on leading podcasts and get in front of the audience of potential customers that are already listening to content about the stuff that they're going to share. So, Tom, before I was talking about how I've gotten some kind of passive declines on my invites that I sent out early on, where people say, not yet. Like, I think this would be good for me, but not right now. And I'm going to give, I want to take a rain check on it. And the reason that people give me that, or have told me that they give me that, is because they're waiting for something to happen in their life. Like, they're waiting for the product to be completely polished, or they're waiting until they do a big rebranding effort, or they're waiting until their career hits that, VP level or something. They're constantly waiting before they want to come on either this show or somebody else's show. So when is a great time for people to start thinking about, I either already have a business or I'm about to launch a business or whatever, but start thinking about, I'm going to plan to get on some podcasts?
Yeah, and for some people, they start too early and other people start way too late. And look at the podcast interview as fuel for your marketing engine, right? So if you just decide, I want to get on some interviews. Well, if you don't have a website to drive them to, something to offer them to help nurture them from being a listener to a visitor, to a lead to a customer, then you're going to waste that fuel. And I've seen this before where people will get on a podcast, a big podcast, and they love it because they've got fuel there, right? But they've got no engine to put it in, so it burns, they get a big flash, they get some heat from it, and a little bit later they're like, I didn't get any business results from that. And I'm like, well, what did you do to harness that? So with that, you've got to look at it. It's not just the podcast interview. Getting on a podcast is not that hard. With 350,000, you can get on one today. You need to make sure it's the right one, because if not, you're wasting your time. But also to look and say, what can I do to move these people from being listeners to visitors to leads? And there's some things that you need in place for that. One is today you need a website. You need to have some kind of social presence, because I guarantee you any podcast host you reach out to is going to check you out before they put you in front of their audience. And that could be as easy as going to your LinkedIn page. It could be going and finding you on Facebook, your website, something like that, as some social proof that this person is worth my time to interview and possibly put in front of my audience. So make sure you have those. Also, make sure that you've got something to offer the audience. Your goal of being a podcast guest is not to sell your stuff. I mean, the podcasts are an awful place for guests to come in and to pitch. That's not what the medium's about. Your goal is to come on there and make the host look like a genius for inviting you, because you offer so much advice, entertainment, value to the conversation. So when you're on there too, and I'll do a little, pulling the curtain back and showing you exactly how this works. You've got to give people a reason to go from being a listener to being a visitor. So before the break there, we talked about the checklist that I use. And I mentioned, I'll share that with you. Well, that was sort of a lead bait, a visitor bait, something like that. And it's like, I can't read off the checklist right here. You wouldn't remember it. So I'm going to put that back on my website. And I'll tell you how to find it. At the end, I'll say, just go to interviewvalet.com/techpros, and it'll be there. And there'll be other resources. So you need to think strategically there of, how can I help the listener next? So in your business, you can say, okay, what little things could I give them that would help them? And it's not, a new iPad. Unless your business is iPads, it's not, but it's something of value. If they liked what you said, if they brought interest in it, then tell them, like for me, okay, I'll also put on there, there's an infographic that I got together, the 9 secrets to getting booked on your first podcast. Even if I listed those out right now, you probably wouldn't remember them. So just go to the site and download that. So always start looking at that. And as an entrepreneur, always think strategically. What does this build into next? How can I do that? And one of the things that I struggle with, and I hate this word sales funnel, because we serve people. We don't serve objects that we're trying to shove down a funnel. Right. Really, you're trying to nurture people to help them. So the question is what's the next step? What's the next thing I can help them with? What can I build trust with? People have to know, like, and trust you. So if they listen to you for a half hour on a podcast, then come back and watch a webinar on half hour on how to use this strategy. Well, keep working them along that to help them. And, sooner or later, they'll become a client or a customer if it's in both of your best interest.
And very quickly, how do we pick the right first podcast? If we're a first timer and we've never done an interview in this kind of media, how do we determine that we're going to go with the small guy who just got started versus the big girl who's got an amazing audience and huge following and has been doing it for 8 years? Where do we find that balance?
Yeah, just remember, there's a reason in baseball they've got minor league teams, the farm teams, and work way up. You don't start at the big league, and you'll embarrass yourself if you do. So a great place to start is new and noteworthy. So you've got podcasts that are starting, and you've probably got a much better chance with those. And make sure that your ideal listeners would listen to that. And I always tell people, no one likes a cold call. So don't just email the host and say, "Dear host, I would like to be on your podcast because it would help me." No, don't. So listen to the podcast a little bit. See if it's a good fit. Leave a comment, a rating and review. Share some of their things. I guarantee you, if a new podcast, if you share the episode, if you leave a rating and review, that podcaster will know who you are. And at that point, after a week, 2 weeks, whatever, reach out to them and say, I like the podcast. I think I've got something that I could offer your listeners. And boy, your chances of getting on that show are so much more better. Better. Mm-hmm. We got it. I'm not going to make you edit that out, but boy, I hope that doesn't show up in a transcript, because I are engineer on that one. But your chances are much, much better if you build that relationship first.
Absolutely, man. And hey, if you want an example on a show to get on, look at this one right here. Hello Tech Pros. Go to hellotechpros.com/guest. I've got a lot of information there on the process that I use, how a person introduces themselves to me, what types of content I record on this show. Right, we've got a 7-day-a-week program. Monday, motivation. Tuesday, productivity. Wednesday, leadership. Thursday, technology. Friday, people and communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. And Sunday, being unplugged. I don't care what you're selling, what you're pitching. There's a way that we can, manipulate it to work for this audience. If you don't mind working with me a little bit offline on making sure that what you're going to talk about, the topic that you are interested in, is a good fit for my audience, right? Because that's my job, is to protect my audience and make sure that they're going to get the value. And I want to help you look like a rock star on this show. So go to hellotechpros.com/guest and apply. It's really easy. I've only said no to 3 people, and really one of them's name was McLovin. So I'm not sure. I don't want to go into details there, but yeah, I set a pass on McLovin. Tom, before we leave this episode, can you share any parting words of wisdom that you have for this audience? The best way that we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, Chad, I've enjoyed this, and thanks for spending your Saturday with me and everybody listening here. If you're listening on Saturday or whatever day of the week it is, I hope it was helpful to you, and that's what my goal is here. And as you listen to this, if you listen to podcasts, you know the power they have. You know the connection. You understand it. You get it. Now, just ask yourself, in the future, as more and more people listen to podcasts, as your future customers, clients, prospects, whatever it is, listen to podcasts, are they going to hear you or someone else? Because they're going to be listening to someone, and you can make that decision. You can start your own podcast, or you can be a guest on someone else's podcast, or you can do both. But I'd urge you to, you're already an early adopter if you're listening to these podcasts, so take advantage of this wonderful medium that we have. And if I can be of any service, please just reach out to me. I know you're probably, running, multitasking while you're doing this, so I'm going to keep it easy. You can find all my information, my social media, my email address, and everything we talked about here, the checklist, that infographic, and a 30-minute webinar, recorded webinar that talks about how to use this strategy. And you can find that all at interviewvalet.com/techpros. And I'm sure Chad will put that in the show notes too. So you don't have to write it down. It's just interviewvalet.com/techpros.
Tom, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your insight from the perspective of someone who's helping people get on podcasts, right? Because what you're doing is both helping the entrepreneurs, the solopreneurs, the small business owners, as well as helping podcast producers and podcast hosts like find each other, right? Because we're all trying to find each other. Hosts are trying to find really good guests. Guests are trying to find awesome shows and awesome audiences, and the audience is trying to get a lot of value out of how to get their business started and how to get their stuff promoted. So I appreciate the service that you're providing to us.
Thank you, Chad.
You bet. Tech Pros, even if you don't have a business that you're marketing, right? Even if you're quote unquote just an employee, it is very important for you to grow your personal brand. You have your own personal brand, whether you're a software developer for GitHub or you're a graphic designer for a mom and pop company in your local neighborhood, wherever you work, whoever you work for. The best thing that you can do for your career is to build this know, like, and trust factor with more people outside of your department, more people outside of your company. And a great way to do that is to get on podcasts and start talking to other folks about the stuff that you care about and show other people why you're such a rock star, and basically have like a verbal resume that you're putting out there, right? I've had other people that were guests on the show early on say, Chad, I lost my job and I went and applied for a new job, and I said, here's my interview that I did on Hello Tech Pros. Here's my interview that I did with Chad. You don't even have to interview me. Just listen to this episode, because this is what I'm all about. This is what I'm passionate about. And I've had one person say that that helped them get a job. So go out, look for podcasts, get yourself out there, work on your own personal brand, and I wish you all the best of luck. You've been listening to Tom Schwab, and I'm Chad Bostic, and until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/241. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If this episode helped you out in any way, please leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you thought. iTunes reviews helps our rankings, which helps us grow the Hello Tech Pros podcast to a broader audience, which helps more technical professionals and techpreneurs build their career, build their products, and build their businesses. If you are a subscriber and get repeat value out of this show, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. The information on this podcast is free to everyone, but I'm giving you the opportunity to pay for the value you get out of it, starting as little as $1 a month. Pledge your support today at patreon.com/hellotechpros or visit hellotechpros.com/sponsor.